The restaurant went completely silent the moment the young waitress leaned in and quietly said, "Sir, my mother has a ring like yours." The billionaire's hand froze midair, his wine glass hovering just inches from his lips. His face went pale, and for the first time in 20 years, the most powerful man in the room had absolutely nothing to say. What that simple sentence uncovered would change both of their lives forever. Before we begin, if you believe fate has a way of bringing lost pieces of our lives back together, please take a moment to like this video, leave a comment, share it with someone who believes in second chances, and subscribe to Daily Kindness for more heart-touching stories. And don't forget to tell us in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to know where our amazing community is joining us from. Grace Ellison had worked at the Copper Fox, a quiet upscale restaurant on the edge of downtown, for almost 3 years. She was known among the staff for her gentle patience and her habit of remembering small details about every regular customer, their favorite table, their usual order, the little things that made people feel seen. What most of her coworkers didn't know was that Grace had grown up without a father. Her mother, Carol, had raised her alone since Grace was a baby, working 2 jobs at a time to keep their small apartment, and never once complaining about how hard life had been. The only thing Carol had kept from those early years was a ring, a simple gold band with a small, unusual engraving on the inside, a pattern of interlocking waves that Grace had memorized as a child, tracing it with her finger while her mother told bedtime stories. Carol never spoke much about where the ring came from. Whenever Grace asked, her mother's eyes would soften with a sadness she never fully explained, and she would simply say, "It belonged to someone I loved a long time ago." That evening, the Copper Fox was hosting a private dinner for a group of investors, among them Nathaniel Cross, a billionaire known throughout the city for his real estate empire and his notoriously guarded, private nature. He rarely gave interviews, rarely appeared in photographs, and almost never dined anywhere that wasn't fully private, but a longtime business partner had convinced him to make an exception that night. Grace had been assigned to his table, and though she recognized his name from the news, she treated him with the same warm, unassuming professionalism she gave every guest. As she poured his water, she noticed a ring on his right hand, gold, simple, with a faint engraving she almost missed at first glance. Something about the pattern made her pause. She had seen those same interlocking waves 1,000 times, etched into a ring her mother wore every single day. She told herself it was probably a coincidence. But something in her chest refused to let it go. Later in the evening, while refilling his glass, she found herself speaking before she had fully decided to. "Sir," she said quietly, "my mother has a ring like yours." Nathaniel's hand froze instantly. His easy, practiced smile faltered. "What did you say?" he asked, his voice suddenly quiet, almost unsteady. Grace, unsure why his reaction had shifted so quickly, explained gently that her mother had worn a similar ring for as long as she could remember, though she had never known its origin. Nathaniel set down his glass with a shaking hand and asked, carefully, what her mother's name was. "Carol," Grace answered. "Carol Ellison." The color drained from his face entirely. For a long moment he said nothing at all, simply staring at the young woman standing beside his table, as though seeing a ghost from a life he had buried decades ago. 26 years earlier, long before his company existed, before the wealth, before the guarded life he now led, Nathaniel had been a young engineer with nothing to his name but ambition and a woman he loved deeply, a woman named Carol, who worked nights at a small diner to help pay his tuition. He had proposed to her with that very ring, made from his late mother's melted wedding band, the only inheritance he had left. But weeks before their wedding, his father's failing business collapsed under enormous debt, and Nathaniel, young, frightened, and pressured relentlessly by his family, made a decision he had regretted every day since. He left to take a position overseas that promised enough money to save his family from ruin, believing at the time that Carol would be better off without the uncertainty he could offer her. He never told her the real reason. He simply left a letter, vague and cowardly, and disappeared from her life entirely, always intending to return once things were stable, a return that kept getting delayed, until years had quietly become decades. He never knew Carol had been pregnant when he left. Sitting now across from a young woman who shared Carol's exact eyes, Nathaniel felt the weight of 26 lost years collapse onto him all at once. He asked, voice barely above a whisper, if he could meet her mother. Grace, cautious but moved by the raw emotion in his expression, agreed to pass along the request, still uncertain what any of this meant. 2 days later, in a quiet corner booth of the very restaurant where Grace worked, Carol Ellison sat across from the man she had once believed abandoned her without explanation. Nathaniel spoke slowly, honestly, laying out everything, the debt, the fear, the cowardice of a 24-year-old who thought he was protecting the people he loved by disappearing rather than asking for help. Carol listened, tears falling silently, decades of unanswered questions finally settling into place. He did not ask for forgiveness. He said only that he wanted, if she allowed it, the chance to know the daughter he never realized existed, and if there was any room left for it, to finally explain himself to the woman he never stopped thinking about. In the months that followed, Nathaniel quietly funded the remainder of Grace's education, something she had put on hold years earlier to help support her mother. He never pushed, never demanded closeness, simply showing up patiently, again and again, letting Grace and Carol decide how much room he deserved in their lives. At Grace's graduation the following spring, Carol sat in the audience beside Nathaniel for the first time in 27 years, not as strangers, and not quite as the family they might have been, but as three people slowly learning how to build something new out of everything that had once been lost. Grace still wears a small ring on a chain around her neck now, engraved with the very same interlocking waves that once connected a mother and daughter to a past none of them had ever fully understood. Sometimes the people we lose find their way back to us in the most unexpected moments. And sometimes a single sentence, spoken without thinking, is enough to reopen a door that had been closed for a lifetime.